thank you very much for joining me here. And I will share something that actually just finished last week, was the results of a studio, urban design studio in the urbanism master, which was for the first time in the urbanism master we explicitly use the social political inclusivity as central in the design. And so a bit of a background information. Well, the course is coordinated by Francisco Mayolan Panesh and myself. And the focus of this course is about the socio-political inclusive urban design engineering, contribution to sustainable development, and the question of urban climate, how to improve the urban microclimate. And the emphasis is a lot on the technical construction of the city. So how do you actually do design? How do you actually design public space in order to perform better in a changing climate? So our problem was comes from this image, which is related to the question of rising temperatures, and that it's a point that is more and more important in our cities. We have seen, for example, last summer in Netherlands and abroad, how temperatures are totally getting weird all over the year, in summer especially, and even we have seen new typologies like these cooling centers in which people who don't afford to have air conditioning have to go to cool down when the weather is rising, is getting to unhealthy conditions. One of the kind of technologies that is used technologies between quotation marks that is used to address the question of improving the urban climate is urban greening and planting new trees and vegetation in cities. And of course, they sort of talked about it, about urban rewilding, and we know all the benefits that vegetation has in our cities. So it's not just cooling down, it also improves our mental health, it reduces noise levels, improves biodiversity, absorbs CO2. So in the end, it's like multiple benefits that support the idea of making our cities greener. And indeed, it's part of the agendas in Europe. So the European Green Deal already in the biodiversity strategy is putting forward the need of, and actually it's asking cities to develop urban green plans by 2030, and also questions of how to improve the soil for increased biodiversity. We see also these several sections of what this street of the future should look like to make it both inclusive of nature and also social activity. We have this nice division of flows, good trees, and sustainable transport. This is the idea of the complete street. Our question for the student was, okay, that's very nice, but how do we actually make it? Especially knowing that the underground of cities is far away from being a natural soil. And actually it's a machine of technology that supports all sort of pipes, cables, underground infrastructure, basements, foundations, which make reaching that goal harder. And what we put up as provocation was the sense that this section that is shaping our cities today is still a 19th century section. It's based on that idea of linear infrastructure, and since then there has not so much innovation about how do we redesign the urban section. Trees are considered urban furniture. They are put in boxes and they don't have enough space to actually grow and thrive. And the result is that research shows that actually trees in cities, urban trees, tend to die quite young. And the result of that is that, actually research shows as well that trees, in order for trees to support mental health or to absorb CO2, they have to be bigger, they have to reach at least 40 years old. And actually trees are dying younger than that. And we also see how, as urban development happens in Dutch cities as well, when there is a project, trees are, even though they are very old and they are healthy, they are the first victims in these projects. So this case of Amsterdam, how in order to redevelop and improve the quay in the canals, the first thing that was rendered as replaceable was the trees. So our question to the students was, how do we rethink the cross-section of public space to make it inclusive of those non-human beings that are part of cities, trees, and leave space for the roots and for all the, let's say, microorganisms and the healthy soil that is needed for them to live. And kind of find this kind of right balance between the idea of the social and the environmental, but also the technological part of infrastructure. So it's about how to move for these nature-based solutions towards nature-inclusive design. How do we reimagine some of the core elements of urban design, the cross-section, towards achieving that dream? How do we account for those kind of structures which are not linear, which are the roots of trees? And how do we deal with time as well? Because, you know, trees and vegetation works on different time logic than urban life. Our testing ground was so challenging. It was the Lineman in Rotterdam, so we chose to have a site which both was in a consolidated city center, and also had a heritage component, because that makes it harder. How do we actually make something green and rewild the city when we have to deal with heritage and with a city that is kind of functioning? We chose as the Lineman because the Lineman was already a first shift in the paradigm of urban design, in the sense that it was the first outdoor pedestrian shopping area. So it's a pedestrian street. It's a shift from the car-oriented mobility towards pedestrian mobility. And also it embodied ideas of open society, consumer society, welfare state, and also the idea of social ecologies of the city. So it kind of comes out of the ideas of the T10 and Bakema about transitional elements and the scales of association between the humans and buildings. It's important to say that social ecologies, because that's not the same as designing social ecological design, because we see how this projects, this project in particular, although it might have as a base the construction of a social ecology, it's kind of performing quite poorly in terms of ecology. And we see now in this map of the Italian effect in Rotterdam, actually it's kind of at the core of this great hotspot of heat. And also, we have acknowledged that the society is changing, so how do we do this project? So the challenge to the students was, how do we develop an urban design intervention, focus on public space, and the design of the cross-section, in order to negotiate between the needs of the social, ecological, in a very complex urban environment, which also has a heritage component. Our approach, so here's what we kind of see, okay, how do we design this? How do we kind of engage students in an iterative process of exploration, but also allowing them to get to a final result, which at least tries to get to our goal of the getting into the actual how do we design. So we probably know this, maybe you've seen this design scheme, which was developed by Van Doven, which talks about a design process in which there's like a concept and a series of layers that one has to be touching, and there is a process of kind of funneling down towards a design, and which is a very useful approach and kind of to engage on design. There's a frame of reference, so as well we know we work operate in that kind of sphere of knowledge. We like this as a departure point, but Greens Dijkstra and myself in a intensive we developed for the second year of masters, the Delft approach to urban design. We thought that diagram needed a bit more of a structure. It had to be unpacked a bit more in order to be helpful for students to engage in a design process. And this is the diagram of it. It is a series of mostly convergent thinking. So there is always input that comes at different steps in the design process to open the mind of the student. And convergent thinking, in which there is always a need to conclude into design. And this is not something which is groundbreaking. This is actually used a lot in the industrial design faculty. Is the kind of the key of design is having these moments of divergence and convergence. In between, there is always this iterative feedback loop of analysis, design, and presentation. So in each one of these moments, there's analysis, so you expand, design to contract, and present as a way to present, to show what you have done. So in the Q2 studio, we actually tried to organize the course according to that idea. So each week, there was a moment of expansion, which was via different assignments, just mapping, of developing options, of workshops. Also, we have lectures in the morning to present a broader perspective on different topics. And then by Fridays, there was a need to come with some sort of results, either in form of a postcard, the presentations, of course, the midterm and final presentations, and all sorts of things. The idea was that if the students come with this first initial frame of reference, by pushing every week with these peaks, with this frame, eventually they will leave the course with a different view on a more equipped set of tools to address these questions in the future. And also this process of iteration was meant to create differentiation, so that at first, when we kind of have this topic, we have to make the light greener. We have an idea of what it looks like, and probably all of us will share it. But as we advance in this process, projects become, we hope they will become more unique. So, I will show the results, which actually the results were submitted on Tuesday by the students. So I scanned all the reports and get some of them, and of course, it's not like a comprehensive representation of the works. So this is the first week. The idea of after a quick analysis of the site in 2 days, and they have to develop a postcard, an image of how they envision that future of the diamond. I guess what I show this is that they all kind of look the same, or have the same idea. That green, that one definition of how it looks like. So that's nice, no? But okay, how do we actually make it? Eventually, there was the sense of okay, we have to develop our options, plan strategy, and we see how that first idea may have good points, but why not looking at it critically and explore other options of how do you actually organize the green on the street? Then you further develop a strategy into what we call an operative urban design strategy. So it was a strategy in the sense of an urban design project which had to be material and had to be specific in terms of spatial implications, not just a strategy in the more urban planning sense. Then there was a moment of also environmental evaluation to implement software to measure the urban heat and wind that allowed to have an iterative process of design, so that you test quickly your design, or quickly takes about a day, but you test your design, and then you can evaluate and see, okay, maybe I have to change a bit my planting or the shape of this building because otherwise there is a shape and then it doesn't work very well. And indeed, at the end of the course, we see how projects got very different. So we have from projects which are indeed addressing the question of green and public space to others which were more maybe political or social, and which had a very clear manifestation. So this drawing on my left, right? I don't see any tree on the drawing, because the emphasis of the student was more on the social networks that would activate an ecological transition. We eventually got to see sections that kind of show how that possible green lineman would look like, at all levels, scale of the building, but also so how the building components and parts of the building could be used to improve the microclimate, and also how do we actually integrate green with them. And the time component, very important, how things evolve in time. And until the end, to the question of how do you make it materials, how do you actually construct this to the level of detail. This part I will read because it's much longer, but so when developing this course, we took this conscious choice of focusing on the social ecological design against the social ecological design. Because in our view, there is a difference between both. In the first one, social is a modifier, and ecology is still central, is the central element of concern. The second is about finding this balance between, or a compromise between the social and the ecological. And our choice was a bit of a provocation, of course, was to a thought experiment to test what could happen if we center urban design from the human and put the needs of non-humans first. And then I also read a bit of reflections of the students and the final reports, and it was interesting to see how for many, once they got into the kind of the ecological mode, it was quite easy to forget about the social dimensions. And they asked for more input on that social dimension to find this balance. Maybe for this course, a matter of time is too short to try to do everything in once. But maybe it's that when we enter in the ecological dimension and this transformation we need to happen in society, we also need to rethink what the social means and some of our assumptions about society that maybe need to be changed in order to make this world better. We'll maybe explore that next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victor. Just for clarification, I hear you talk also of non-human inhabitants of the city, like the tree, but I'm sure you mean animals as well. It's an ecological perspective on who inhabits the city. So can we make this clear that when we are speaking of a inclusive city, that we're not just talking about social inclusion of human beings, income problems or gender issues or all of these things, but we are talking actually also about inclusivity of non-human. Yes. Okay. So I'm curious to hear what the room thinks about that, if we're on the right track there, or if we should put our emphasis elsewhere. And what I hear you say is that in your design methodology that you propose for the students, it's a cyclic iterative process as we know it. And when I asked Stefan just now about transdisciplinarity, his answer was, yeah, we all do that by nature. So by now I get the impression, designing for a social, ecological, inclusive city, no sweat. We do. There's, from a design methodology perspective, no challenge.
There is challenges. There are challenges, of course. It's not that easy as it sounds, and it's mostly about taking a position for what you do. And what do you put central in your design, and the kind of compromises you have to make. So you want to make a, let's transform this parking into a social special faculty, which has lots of vegetation and trees and everything can happen there. Then, as soon as we get into the design, we'll notice that there is lots of things that cannot be negotiated. So, probably to put on social activities and to install food trucks and stages to do things, you need a hard paved surface which maybe is not permeable, and you cannot grow anything. So it's also about taking decisions about what do you value more, especially in the context we are now with the climate emergency.
Yeah. Okay, but again, from a design methodology perspective, that's not the key point.
Well, it's one of the input the student. I think the question of transdisciplinarity and disciplinarity is the important part. This input that kind of allows for this convergent, these divergent moments, is the moment in which the input of these disciplines can help. And then we, in the second part, we use our discipline to kind of to conclude and to take forward.
Thanks for the clarification.